Nice. So, welcome everyone to SMU. My name is Johan Reeb. I'm the director of the Mindfulness Initiative and the faculty member in the business school. And so allow me to just briefly introduce our speaker for today, Vidyamala Burch, originally from New Zealand, now based in the UK. Vidyamala is the co-founder, together with Sona, of Breathworks, who have been really one of the pioneers of bringing mindfulness into the secular world, into the regular world, outside, and in particular for working for people with pain, with health problems, stress nowadays also. And that's something that a lot of us are facing, right? A lot of us are facing stress, a lot of us are facing pain, at least certain times in our lives. So the work she has and they have been doing at Breathworks has been extremely helpful, beneficial, and also very, very kind of, I think, innovative. So today she'll be sharing with us a bit about mindfulness as a foundation for health. So without further ado, it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take it from here.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Can you all hear me okay? Yes. Good. I suggest we just have a little moment, shall we? Some of you might have rushed to get here. Let's just arrive, settle, and I'll lead you in a very, very short little mindfulness practice. Okay? So if it's comfortable, putting both your feet flat on the floor. And allowing your bottom to rest right back into the chair and to have your back supported. Let your hands rest in your lap comfortably. And let's all just take a few deep breaths. And on the out breath, allowing ourselves to arrive in this body, this moment, this room, a little bit more. Feeling like any sense of rushing or stress or hassle is draining out of the body with each out breath. See if you can give all of your body up to gravity, this mysterious force that's drawing us down towards the floor. So let's just see if we can rest in gravity, rest in the body. Letting our thoughts come and go like clouds in the sky. Perhaps resting our awareness inside, breathing in the belly for a few moments as a place of rest. When we're ready, we can open the eyes and moving the body however we want to. I feel an urge to stretch, so I'm going to stretch. So whatever you feel you want to do, please feel free to do it. You don't have to fit in this room. You can do whatever you want during the next hour and a half. If you've got a back problem, say, and sitting in a chair for long periods of time is uncomfortable, then by all means, just stand up, lie down, do whatever. We'll be very happy if you do that. As you can see, I'm sitting in a wheelchair, so I've got a spinal injury and I've got a lot of back pain. And it helps me if I stand up with my crutches every 23 minutes. I've worked that out. So I've got a timer on my watch, and after 23 minutes it will go off, and I'm going to stand up and just keep talking. And then I'll sit down again. And when my timer goes off, you might think, wow, I would really like to stand up as well. And please do. Good, so thank you all very much for coming, and thank you very much to Johan and the Mindfulness Initiative for hosting this public talk. And I'm going to be talking about mindfulness as a foundation for health and well-being. And how does that work? And how can becoming more aware help us become healthier? Help us to live our human lives the best way we can, no matter what comes along, illness, disability, whatever. We can still have a very good quality of life. I'm going to say a little bit more about my personal story during the talk, so you'll hear a bit more about that then. So this word mindfulness, I don't know about in Singapore, but certainly in the UK, it's a bit of a buzzword. Is it a buzzword here? Yeah. Word that people hear. And what does it mean, this word mindfulness? Perhaps you've got some idea. I think that the easiest way to understand mindfulness is very, very simple, and it's awareness. So that's the simplest and most direct way to understand this word mindfulness is awareness. So it's knowing what we are experiencing in any given moment. So knowing what thoughts are flowing through your mind, knowing what your emotional weather is, what your emotional state is, and knowing how your body feels. And it's in the present moment. Because the only time we can experience ourselves directly is now. The past moment is a memory. We might have a memory of physical sensations, but we're not having them directly. And the future moment is still a dream or a story, an idea about what's going to happen. But the only moment that we can live is this moment. So mindfulness is present moment awareness. It's also intentional awareness. Yeah? So we're using our faculty of awareness to choose to move our lives in the direction that we want to go. So we become aware of thoughts in our minds, and we have a choice how we respond to those thoughts. We become aware of sensations in the body, and we have a choice in how we respond to those sensations. Say we're grumpy. Yeah, we have a choice. Do we feed that grumpiness, or do we decide to take another action that may make us feel less grumpy? So mindfulness is extremely pragmatic. And in a way, I want to demystify it in this talk. I think sometimes it can seem a bit mystical or a bit strange or a bit mysterious or unattainable. But really, it is simply just waking up to this human life in this moment, knowing what we're experiencing. And the outcome, the very important behavioural outcome is choice. So we move from feeling a victim of circumstances, perhaps, to feeling that we've got a sense of agency in our own lives. And we can guide our lives in a direction that we value, whatever that is. Sometimes it's called wisdom, or it might be goodness, or it might be you want to be kinder, you want to love your children more, you want to be less compulsively addicted to your smartphone, whatever it might be. Mindfulness gives you this sense of agency, this sense of choice. It's very, very important. It's embodied, as I've just said, so it's not an idea. That's also very, very important. Yeah, maybe you've read some definitions of mindfulness and it all seems a bit heady. It's in the body. It's very interesting that most of our experience, when we look at it directly, is happening in the body. Thoughts are mapping in the body, our breathing is in the body, feelings of temperature are in the body, heat, cold, hunger, all these things are in the body. Emotions like anger, they will be in the body. So the body is a huge part of what it means to be human. And yet in the modern world, it seems many of us live a little bit alienated from our bodies. And that's not going to lead to a happy existence, being alienated from your body, because guess what? Here it is. We've all got a body, whether we like it or not. And even in my case, with a body that's damaged and painful, I've learned that the way to inner peace, sense of more contentment, is deeply inside my body. As soon as I try to split off from my body, then I get tension. So even though my body hurts, coming inside it is the place of rest and the place of ease. So mindfulness is awareness, it's in the moment, it's embodied. And as I've said, the outcome of mindfulness is choice. So it's very, very practical, very, very pragmatic, very useful. It's an innate human capacity, and that's also very important. It's said that it's like language acquisition. Any human being can learn language, and any human being can learn mindfulness. Any human being can learn awareness. Transcends culture, gender, age, physical ability, intellectual ability. And that's one of the wonderful things about it. It's there, accessible to any human being at any time. And I think this analogy with language acquisition is quite interesting. We can all learn a language. Some of us choose not to maybe learn other languages, but we can all learn another language. We can all learn to be more mindful and more aware. In terms of healthcare, mindfulness is coming into the health systems in many, many different countries and many, many different ways. So there's now quite a substantial body of evidence showing the efficacy of mindfulness for chronic pain, for depression, for anxiety, for cancer, for addiction, and also for improving well-being. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy for people with severe recurrent depression is now recognised as a treatment of choice in the National Health Service in the UK. I mean, that's amazing. You can go to your doctor in the UK and you're prescribed a course of mindfulness. Our programme, which is called Mindfulness-Based Pain Management, is used in pain clinics in the UK. So again, the health service is recognising it, purchasing it, and people who've got chronic pain go to their doctor and get prescribed mindfulness. And the evidence shows that it's effective, particularly in terms of the emotional reactivity to pain. So depression, quality of life, anxiety, all those sorts of things improve greatly with a mindfulness course. You may not be able to get rid of the pain, but you can learn to live well with the pain rather than fighting the pain. And that makes your life worth living, rather than having a life that's ruined by your reactivity to whatever difficulties coming along. Mindfulness is used in the workplace increasingly, in the prison service, criminal justice service. In the UK, a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, there was a major, it's called an all-party parliamentary group, that's the technical term, and it's a government-funded initiative investigating the efficacy of mindfulness across different domains. It was held in the Houses of Parliament, MPs and Lords attended, and lots of expert witnesses. And there's a report called Mindful Nation UK that's been published, looking particularly at mindfulness in the criminal justice system in education, healthcare, and in the workplace. And on the basis of that, there's increasing initiatives rolling out in UK society. In America, it's used very widely in a whole range of situations. And I gather it's really gaining momentum in Singapore. I've been hearing that the last few days, which is really wonderful. There's also studies showing that it changes the structure of the brain. So this is also interesting. We've got an evidence base that's based on self-report questionnaires, where people describe their experience before and after the programme. So that's showing change. But there's also some studies showing that the amygdala gets smaller. And the amygdala is the part of the brain that's all to do with fight, flight, and freeze. So through mindfulness training, calming training, the amygdala actually shrinks. So that's very, very interesting. Some studies showing a thickening of the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain to do with decision-making, impulse control, those kind of things. It's in early days, all the brain science, but there's a rapidly developing body of evidence showing that something about mindfulness is very effective. And the next generation of research is going to be looking at, well, what exactly is it about mindfulness that's effective? It's a low-cost intervention. Yeah. So I've got a really bad back. I've had extremely expensive high-tech surgery in my life, which has helped and been necessary. But mindfulness, which is, it's a group-based intervention, no equipment, all it costs is a room hire, that's massively changed my life. So it's very interesting. It's a low-cost, highly effective intervention for healthcare. So how did I come to mindfulness? How have I come to be sitting here, a woman, 58 years old, in a wheelchair in Singapore, born in New Zealand, telling you about mindfulness? That's a very strange journey, a Westerner. So I was a sporty girl in New Zealand, very, very active, happy in my body. I never really thought about my body. I completely took my body for granted, and it was a place of ease and comfort for me, because I was so sporty and so active. So I had a body that worked really, really well. I was lucky. And then when I was 16, I had an injury. I had 2 major surgeries the next year, and that was the beginning of my life of chronic pain. And then when I was 23, I was in a car crash, and I fractured another part of my spine. So there's 2 parts of my spine that have been effectively broken. I've now got partial paraplegia, got paralysed bowel, paralysed bladder. I can walk a bit with crutches, but my mobility is very limited. The first 10 years after my injury, I was in absolute and utter denial. And this is very common. When something catastrophic happens, we try to pretend it hasn't happened. So I just tried to make the whole thing go away through overworking, pushing myself, running away. So that was my main strategy, was to run away from myself. Eventually, I ended up in a hospital in New Zealand in 1985, having a major, major crisis after a treatment had gone wrong, and I was in an intensive care ward. And I was lucky enough to have a visit from the hospital chaplain. I wasn't religious, but the medical team didn't really know what to do with me, because I had this damage that there was no medical solution for. So they asked this hospital chaplain to come and see me. And he did a very short visualization practice with me, where he got me to remember a time and a place when I'd been happy. So I remembered the Southern Alps of New Zealand, where I'd been ecstatic as a teenager before my accident. So I remembered that, and he brought me back. I have no idea how long that was. It would be no more than 10 minutes, I'm sure. And when I came back, my subjective experience had changed dramatically. Same girl, same hospital bed, same back pain, and yet how I perceived that pain had changed by what I'd done with my mind. And that was like a door opening for me, that I had a mind, that I could choose what I attended to. Up till then, I'd never considered that I had a mind. I was just alive, running away from myself, getting on with my life in a pretty desperate state. And it was like someone had said, you have got a mind that you can train, and by choosing what you attend to, your subjective experience changes. So that was very significant for me. I also had another night in the hospital where I was really desperate. And I honestly did not think I could get through till the morning. So I was in a state of extreme mental distress, I would say. And I was having this whole big tussle. And then a voice came in at a certain point, very, very clearly, that said, you don't have to get through till the morning. You just have to live this moment, and this one, and this one, and this one. And at that point, it's a bit like time and space kind of collapsed like a house of cards. And I realized that this whole anxiety about the future was entirely mind-created. And the only moment I had to live was now, and I could do that. Even though I was in extreme pain, extreme distress, I could live this moment. And again, that opened a big door for me. What does it mean to be really present and to let go of worrying about the future and fretting about the past? And how could I learn to do that? And really, ever since then, that was in July 1985, that's been my main quest in my life. You know, what does it mean? What does it mean to be fully present and to keep on bringing myself back to my direct experience and make choices in how I respond? So that's a long time ago. That's 33 years ago. And I often think I had a life up to that point of that night, and then I've had another life since, which has been all about what does it mean to be present, to be awake, to be aware, to choose, to be whole. When I was discharged from the hospital, I knew that I wanted to investigate my mind, because I'd been given this awakening in a way of, I have a mind that can be trained, and how can I be present? So I had a really great social worker. He got me books, tapes, all this kind of thing. This was 1985 in New Zealand. Nobody meditated. Nobody. And I was saying to my social worker, I want to know about my mind. I want to know how to be present. I want to know how to take responsibility for this function that I have. And she was great, because she managed to source some cassette tapes. That's what we had in those days, and books. And I spent months, because I was in rehab for months, really spending most of my time in bed. And I spent these months just investigating my mind. And I knew, yes, this was the key. This was going to be the key to having a good life, to learn how to manage my own mind. Eventually, about 2000, I felt ready to see, did I have something of use to other people? So I'd done all this work for 15, 20 years, really trying to come to grips with my own situation. And I knew that mindfulness, being aware, meditation, compassion practices, that they had completely transformed my life. And I wanted to offer this to other people. Partly because I thought back to that girl, that 25-year-old girl lying in a hospital bed, being told by the medical team, there's really nothing we can do for you, you have to learn to come to terms with it. And yet not really being given any particular methods of how to come to terms with it. And I'd spent the next 20 years trying to figure it all out. And I thought, I don't want anyone else to have to do this, because it had been very, very lonely. And I thought, well, my journey is in a way a universal human journey. And maybe there's things in my journey that I can pull out and I can teach to other people. So I got a little bit of money from the UK government in the year 2000. And I started seeing if I could develop a program based on mindfulness-based stress reduction, but adapting it with some of the things I'd learned from my own life. And immediately I realised, yes, this works for people. And I realised to my shock how many people there are in our cultures with chronic pain. It's an invisible condition. And so I used to think, well, I'm kind of the only one. But statistically, it's about 1 in 5. About 1 in 5 in the developed world live with chronic pain, which is daily pain for at least 3 months. And for many of those people at that point, there wasn't a great deal of support. I mean, there is more now with things like mindfulness programs. So people came along on my program and it really helped them. So I found that, as you can imagine, deeply moving and satisfying that out of the sort of wreckage of my own life, I was able to do something to help other people. And I really wanted to help other people, gave my life more meaning. Then in 2003, I was joined by Sona and another colleague, both of whom are more experienced meditators than I was. And we decided that we'd see if we could really roll this out in a way that was going to help other people. My time has gone off, so please feel free to move as well if you want to. We realised when we got our heads around the prevalence of chronic pain, prevalence of chronic health conditions, it's about 1 in 3 now. About 1 in 3 in the developed world lives with a chronic health condition. It's massive, that's billions of people. And here was 3 of us in Manchester in the north of England running, 4 courses a year. And we thought, well, that's not going to really do very much in terms of meeting the need. So we decided to become a teacher training organisation. So we decided we would train other people to deliver this program so that the reach would be so much bigger. And we've now got over 370 teachers in over 27 countries, which goes to show that it's applicable in a wide range of cultures and a wide range of situations. So of course that's really wonderful. There's all these different people learning these essential basic skills in terms of how to manage their condition better. So how does one practice mindfulness? So I've told you what it is, I've told you why it's important, but how does one actually practice it? Because it's, again, you might think, well, that all sounds very well and good, but how can I apply that to me? So I'm just going to run through a little model that I've developed, which is called BOLD. So it's the Be Bold acronym. So B is breathe. I'm going to tell you a bit about that in a moment. O is observe. So learn to observe one's thoughts rather than being caught up with one's thoughts. L is love. So bring a kindness towards one's experience. And then D is decide. So make decisions based on your awareness that are wise, that are helpful, that are going to be beneficial to you and other people. And we call it a practice because that's what it is. It's very like learning a musical instrument. If you wanted to learn the piano, you wouldn't sit down tomorrow expecting to be able to play Mozart, would you? You'd start with the scales, you'd learn the fingering, you'd learn the keyboard, you maybe learn how to read music, and eventually, day after day after day, you'd become proficient. And eventually, you'd be able to play Mozart. Something that seemed impossible at the beginning, you would master. Mind training is very, very similar. The traditional image for the untrained mind is a monkey in a tree. So a human being who's never begun to train their mind, their mind is wild. Our minds are just crazy. They're jumping all over the place. They're chasing sense impressions on the whole. An impression comes in that we like and we just want more of it. An impression comes in that we don't like and we push it away. And we're just bouncing between, I want more of this, and go away to that all the time, 24/7. Highly unpleasant. So you've got a job on your hands, to tame the monkey is not easy. But if you do it little bit by little bit by little bit, then your monkey can become completely tamed and your mind can become like an elephant. So that's one of the images for the trained mind, which I think is very beautiful. Because elephants are so grounded, they're so solid, they're so stately. And the very interesting thing about an elephant, I believe, I don't know this absolutely as a fact, but it seems right from what I know of elephants, is that they can't really turn their heads. So if they're going in a certain direction, and there's something they want to look at over here, they have to turn their whole body, fully attend. Yeah? So they can't be going along and think, oh, that's a nice bottle of water over there. They have to turn around. So that's what we're learning to do. We're learning to become like an elephant, where if there's something that we want to pay attention to, we fully attend. And of course, this is very interesting in the modern world with our very distracted minds, where we're on our smartphones, maybe got YouTube playing over here, we've got the kids over there, and our minds are just all over the place. So one of the big things is to learn to just come back, invite the mind back again and again and again to an object of concentration or an object of awareness. Another image is that you're training a puppy. So you're going for a walk with your puppy, and the puppy just runs off, doesn't it? So you call it back, and the puppy comes back, and maybe it walks beside you for a few tiny little seconds, and then it runs off again. And you call it back. And eventually, you train your puppy. And you go for a walk with your puppy, and it's just running along beside you, or walking along beside you. So that's what we're trying to do, have a mind that's like a trained puppy, or a mind that's like an elephant, rather than a scatty mind. So a very traditional object of awareness is breathing. So you give your mind your breathing as a place of rest and something to keep coming back to. The mind runs off, you come back to breathing. The mind runs off, you come back to breathing. Breathing's very good for a number of different reasons. One is it's always there. So you don't need to take any equipment with you for your mind training. If you're training your body, you maybe need to take your weights. But for mind training, you don't need to take any equipment because you have your breathing with you all the time. Breathing is at least potentially interesting. No two breaths are the same. It's our life force. It's in the whole body. We can feel it in the front and the back. We can ask ourselves, what's its quality? Is it rough, smooth, short, long? Is it high in my body, low in my body? So it's at least potentially interesting. And the mind goes to what it's interested in. So one of the great tasks of meditation is to make your breathing more interesting than your distractions. Another reason why breathing is really helpful is because most of us hold our breath. Most of us contract our breath. So let's just do a little experiment so you can get a sense of that. And the reason why it's helpful is if we can learn to release our breath using awareness, that's also going to be good for us. So let's all make a fist with one hand. And what's happened to your breathing? Anyone breathing?
Pause.
Sorry? You're holding your breath, yeah? I would imagine most of us are holding our breath. Okay. Now imagine guiding your breathing into the fist. And what does the fist want to do? Do you find that your fist wants to open? Yeah? Okay. So the fist here is a metaphor for any contracted state, be it pain in the body, a mental state that's difficult and tight, or an emotional state that's difficult and tight. And what this is telling us is that as soon as we've got any kind of stress, any pain, any discomfort, any agitation, we've also got breath holding. And living your life with chronic breath holding, it just isn't great. So in terms of a foundation for health, chronic breath inhibition is not going to be good for your health. But learning to notice every time you're holding a breath and to release it, that will be very good for your health. Now it's a training, but that's a relatively easy training, and that can have profound health benefits. So let's just have a little go at a very brief breathing meditation together. Let's see if we can get a sense of this. So if we once again give the weight of the body up to the chair, up to the floor. Seeing if we can let our bodies rest in gravity. Just notice any tendency to pull away, to strain away from the chair, and see if we can drop into the chair. Feeling the contact between your bottom and the chair, the feet and the floor. Feeling inside those sensations if you can. Scanning through the body and noticing any areas where you're holding your breath. Maybe your chest feels tight or your belly feels tight. Your upper back feels tight, your lower back feels tight. Without any judgment, any harsh judgment, thinking you're doing anything wrong, it's just the way it is. Let's try breathing into that contraction. So softening that holding, that gripping, that guarding with breathing. On the in-breath and the out-breath. Each out-breath allowing our weight to drop into the chair even more. So we're being curious about areas of contraction, and we're releasing these with awareness. Maybe they contract again in the next moment, so then you release again. Very, very simple training. Now let's drop our awareness into the belly, into the abdomen, the soft front of the body. Being curious, are there any movements in this area as we breathe? Maybe there's a swelling on the in-breath, a subsiding on the out-breath. Allowing your breath to be natural. And see if you can use this as an anchor for the mind. So calling awareness inside this part of the body. Being curious and interested in the movements and the sensations. Every time the puppy of the mind runs off, inviting it back into the sensations and movements of breathing in the belly. This is the training. When you notice your mind has wandered is a moment of mindfulness. That's a moment of success in the practice. Because you're aware. And then you've got this choice. What do you do with that? I'm going to invite it back inside, breathing inside the belly. And this can also be soothing and calming. It stimulates the calming side of the autonomic nervous system. Calms down the agitation side. And you can do this anywhere. You can do it on the bus, on the train, at your desk. You can do it standing, in the queue at the supermarket. Notice when you're gripping your breath, release, and then drop your awareness deep in the body. Okay, so let's bring this to a close. We can open our eyes, stretch if we want to. Just notice, do you feel different at all from that few moments? Just, I don't know, maybe 3 minutes. Wasn't much. And yet it felt to me like the atmosphere in the room calmed. And that's your first mindfulness technique if you've never done it before. Come into the body, release tension and rest awareness inside breathing. Call back the puppy of the mind again and again and again. And perhaps bring to mind the image of an elephant. I enjoy doing that. Elephant mind. So that's breathing. The next word in the acronym is observe. So we're learning to take an observing stance on our own inner world, which is a remarkable capacity. We've got the ability as human beings to be aware of our own minds. I mean, I find that really extraordinary. We don't need to feel completely identified with the content of our minds. We can take a step back and see our thoughts as mental events rather than facts. So a nice little saying is thoughts are not facts, even those that say they are. So a thought, I'm really stupid or I'm really rubbish at meditation, you don't need to believe that, it's just a thought. Another nice little saying is we're learning to look at our thoughts rather than from our thoughts. Yeah, we're looking at our thoughts rather than from our thoughts. Usually we look from our thoughts, and many of those thoughts are not particularly helpful. So we're learning to step out of being identified with the content of the mind, and then we can choose which thoughts are useful and which thoughts are perhaps best to be let go of. A human being has something like 30,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day. What percentage do you think of those thoughts we've had before? What do you think in terms of repetitive thoughts? 50? Yeah? Any other takers?
90.
95? 90? Yeah? Apparently it's more than 95. So that's quite something. 30,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and more than 95% of them we've had before. So a lot of our mental activity is inconsequential, repetitive chatter. I've got so many emails. When am I going to do my emails? What's for dinner? I must join the gym. That's a good repetitive one. I must join the gym. I must join the gym. These kind of things, they're not important, but they're filling our heads up. Imagine if you could just let these flow through the mind without sticking to them. So there's a few images here that are nice. One is that our thoughts are like clouds passing across the sky. So our awareness is the blue sky, and our thoughts are as clouds passing across. Another one is leaves floating down a stream, which maybe, I don't know if you have leaves on streams in Singapore, do you? Anyway, just imagine you're in England or somewhere and it's autumn, and you've got a stream and you're standing on the bank and you've got these leaves floating by. Those are your thoughts. I think a good one for Singaporeans is you're at the airport, at the arrivals terminal, and your thoughts are the luggage on the luggage carousel. Yeah. And they're coming around. Now, I think that's a really good one because some of our thoughts are big, and some of our thoughts are little, and some of our thoughts are messy, and some of our thoughts are tidy. You know, little boxes of thoughts, and some of them are great big suitcases that are spilling open on the carousel. Yeah. And we're just standing there letting them pass by. We're not climbing on top of the carousel and getting carried away. So that's one of the big skills of mindfulness, is not getting carried away by our thoughts. We're not suppressing them, and we're not getting carried away. It's the nature of the mind to think. So sometimes people mistake mindfulness with thinking it's having a blank or an empty mind. Very, very few of us will have a blank or an empty mind. Maybe if you were a very, very advanced meditator, you might have moments where your mind is empty. But human beings in a normal world, your mind's going to be thinking. But you're learning to let them come, let them go, let them come, let them go. And thoughts that are really helpful, you can choose to follow those. So you're developing this facility of mental agility, which is an enormous skill, isn't it? Rather than feeling powerless in the face of the chaos inside our minds. And then we've got love. Yeah, love. And what I mean by this is that, and this is a very, very important point, that the quality of awareness that we call mindfulness is warm. It's not aloof. Even these images I'm giving of things floating by, it could feel a bit cool, a bit aloof, like we're splitting off from ourselves. But in fact, mindfulness in its true sense is very warm, very emotionally engaged. So you're caring about your own mind the way you would care about somebody that you love. I mean, it's a precious thing. Our minds are so precious, and yet we treat them with so little regard. We let them fill up with all kinds of rubbish, and we torment ourselves with our minds. But imagine treating your own mind, your own heart, your own body, the way you would naturally treat someone that you loved, a child, a lover, a parent, perhaps. That's the quality that true mindfulness embodies. So it's very, very caring. For me in my own situation, you know, I have a very good life now, despite the fact that I have pain all the time. And as much, let me say, how to say this quality of life that I now have has been cultivated as much through deep caring for my body as through awareness of my body. Learning to really deeply care for my well-being and my body has been as important as awareness. They go hand in hand. So sometimes it's said that wisdom and compassion are two sides of a coin, or they're the two wings of a bird. So we're ending up aware that awareness and kindness, wisdom, compassion, they must be equally balanced. You can't have one without the other to become a truly whole, wise, awake human being. So I don't mean sentimental love, I mean care, deep care. And I think we all long for that, don't we? We all long to have care in our lives, caring for ourselves, caring for other people. Feeling care coming towards us from others is so precious, isn't it? So it's a quality of emotional warmth, emotional engagement is very, very important in mindfulness. And as I've said a number of times, and I'm just going to repeat it now because I think it's so important, is mindfulness enables us to choose and to decide moment by moment by moment what we want to attend to, how we're going to attend to it, and to choose to bring this quality of warmth, emotional engagement and tenderness. So every single moment you have a choice. Your mind, you have a thought come in. So just before this talk, actually, it's interesting. I've had quite a long day because I led a workshop this morning, and then we went out for lunch, lovely lunch. And then I knew I had to give this talk, and I'm living with chronic pain and I get tired. And I was wheeling down the corridor to go to the loo, and I had a thought, very clear, thinking, I really don't want to give this talk. And it was, I can't do it. It was quite interesting. It was quite strong. I can't give this talk because I was just feeling a bit tired and my back pain is bad. And I noticed that thought, and I dialogued with myself. I had awareness of it. I noticed the contraction in the body that came with it. It was very, very interesting. It's like, I can't do it. Yes, you can. And the contraction, okay, release, relax. And it was very clear to me that thought was not a fact. It was just my mind throwing up something habitual. How can I get out of this? And I took a moment, went to the toilet, took a moment, breathed, watched my mind, let it settle, and I thought, no, of course I can do this talk. Of course I can. And I really enjoyed giving this talk. But that was very interesting. If I hadn't practiced mindfulness and I wasn't aware, that's the sort of thought that can completely hijack your life, isn't it? Because it's not really conscious, but it's I can't do it, I can't do it, so we don't do things. But because I could catch it, work with it, soften my body, I could hold it quite lightly. In the end, I found it quite amusing. Yeah. When it first came in, it wasn't particularly amusing. But then it was like, oh, it's just my mind. I don't have to go there. Yeah. So this faculty of deciding moment by moment by moment, how do you want to respond to what your experience is, that is the key to a life. And then gradually you can guide your life through all these micro decisions. It's like micro decisions. You guide your life in the direction within which you want it to go. And I often think it's like turning around an ocean liner. And you must have all seen that because there's so many ocean liners outside Singapore. Great big enormous ship. And they're going along forwards. To turn around a big ship, they don't turn on a dime, do they? You've got to slow it down, you've got to inch it round, and then eventually it might go in a completely different direction. And I think that's what mind training is like. It's micro choices, micro moments. And we'll blow it a lot of the time, and we'll forget a lot of the time, but every moment is a new chance. Every single moment is another opportunity to think, okay, what's the skillful choice now? And now, and now. I'm really stressed, what can I do now? I've just shouted at my partner, what can I do now? I'm tensing against my pain, what can I do now? Yeah. So it's this very, very gradual turning around of our behaviour, and we are literally rewiring our brains when we do that. Rewiring our nervous system when we do that. Very pragmatic, very effective. Anyone can do it. So the final message really is to be bold. Breathe, observe, love, and decide. And I like this thing of being bold because I think sometimes people think that mindfulness is very soft, or mindfulness is passive, and it's all a bit kind of flaky. It's extremely bold. It's the most courageous thing you can do to face your own mind, your own life, and make choices. So it's incredibly bold. And an image which I really enjoy, that I liked, it's my own sort of myth in a way, is to become a warrior with a soft heart. Not a warrior, but a warrior. And a warrior with a soft heart. So it's courage and softness together, which is absolutely fascinating. How to live a life where we're courageous and strong and yet soft and heartfelt. And that is indeed possible. So be bold. That's my final exhortation to you all. So I'll leave the talk here, and I believe we're going to have a panel discussion now with a few of us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so good afternoon everyone. So now it's the panel session. So we're very happy, so maybe I'll introduce myself, but my name is Karen Teo. So I'm part of the Mindfulness Initiative at SMU. So I teach as MBSR, the 8-week program over here. I came into mindfulness also like 10 years ago from my own suffering, from my own emotional pain, physical pain as well. So I'm very happy that mindfulness has helped me to cope with the changes in my own life. So at some point, I decided to make a career switch to becoming a mindfulness teacher. So I'm very grateful for this journey. So I'm happy to be here to introduce these very four preeminent speakers with us. Maybe just to share a short story. Before this, actually, I wasn't prepared to be a moderator at all. So I was kind of like last minute being drawn in by Professor Jochen Rapp. So,
It's very bold.
I'm very bold. So when Vidyamala was speaking about bold, about confronting our fears, so it kind of reminded me of that. So at that moment in time, I don't want to do this at all. I was like, okay, there's nobody else. I should just raise my hand up and volunteer for this job. Okay, so forgive me if I'm not doing a good job being a moderator. Okay, so I would like to introduce these three people for you all. Okay, so Sona Africa beside Vidyamala, so he's the co-founder of Breathworks, who founded Breathworks in 2004 together with Vidyamala. So maybe do some self-intro of yourself.
Sorry?
Some self-intro about yourself.
Yes, I was an engineer by profession, and I became interested in yoga and meditation when I was quite young, and the mind constantly fascinated me. I wanted to find out what a mind could do, and nowadays I kind of think of the mind as consciousness as like a new frontier to be explored, that science has made so many sort of leaps forward in things, but that's one of my pet interests, is exploring the mind. In the year 2000, I met Vidyamala, came across the fact that people lived in chronic pain. I'd had good health up until that point, and I just was amazed that she was trying to help people with mindfulness, which I was quite familiar with, and I went on a course and saw it worked, and I just wanted to participate in it and help her to develop the course, and it's been an amazing journey.
Yeah. So Sona led us through some practices this morning. We have a half-day session with him, so it was really wonderful. So the next person we have on the panel is Professor Chris Cheng. So Professor Chris Cheng, he is actually the CEO of Sengkang Health. He's also a doctor, urologist, and as well as he is the first urologist from Singapore to be fellowship certified in uro-oncology at the Mayo Clinic in 1992. So he's with Sengkang Health as both the senior consultant and CEO. So maybe we would like to invite Fortune to give us a brief intro about himself.
Most appropriate intro, probably I'm a beginner mindfulness practitioner, hoping to bring more mindfulness into medical practice. starting with our new organization, Income Health. It's supposed to look after a lot of old people. After practicing medicine for the last 30 plus years, we become quite good at the scientific part of medicine, but we don't know enough and certainly not practicing well as far as the mental suffering and the pain may be the same, but the mental burden are very variable, and a lot more can be done. So we've been trying to learn and teach mindfulness at Sengkang, making some small baby steps.
So the next person we have over here is none other than Professor Jochen Red. So he's the Director of Mindfulness Initiative at SMU. He's also the Associate Professor for OBHR teaching in SMU. So you would like to share something about Mindfulness Initiative?
Yeah, thank you. So the Mindfulness Initiative has started at SMU a few years ago. Gracious support of the Dean and the Provost, and I'm just really grateful to have this platform so we can have events like this here, and it's wonderful to see people joining and being interested in the topic, because I found for me that mindfulness is quite helpful, and I conduct research on mindfulness, particularly in the workplace, and there's growing evidence in that area as well, that mindfulness can really help people at work deal with stress, so much stress at work going on, right? Burnout, lack of engagement, disengagement at work. So more and more research supporting the benefits of mindfulness at the workplace as well. So I'm glad that SMU can support this work in spreading the information about some of the benefits, and also offering some practical courses that people can attend to and learn about mindfulness. And it's also great to see some people from SMU here in the room. So I hope we can further strengthen the community within SMU and beyond in Singapore.
So Prof. Red himself is a mindfulness teacher as well. So he also teaching in his own teaching of the non-mindfulness program. Okay, so we have everyone here. So now is the time to open up to hearing questions that you may have for our panel members. And if you're asking questions, maybe you would like to indicate whether the question is for a particular person in the panel, or is it for everyone? It's open to everyone to address.
A question.
Yes.
This is pertains to a friend of mine who is now kind of starting dementia. Would mindfulness be able to help? Because dementia is one in which you lose awareness of yourself and your surroundings and everything. Would mindfulness be useful, or can you train them to people who are in the initial stages of dementia?
Evening.
I don't know for sure. I think I've come across some paper titles or abstracts that I've seen, but because it's not my field, I haven't actually read the papers. But I think there's research going on in mindfulness for kind of prolonging the onset or the development of dementia. But I'm not sure how strong the evidence is. So yeah, I have to look it up.
I think it's certainly a field that is of interest. There's a study happening in Bristol in the UK around this. And again, I think it's to do with the early stages of dementia. Trying to give people skills so they can, in a way, protect what cognitive function they've got left and not get really stressed out. I think the evidence is promising, but again, I haven't got it at my fingertips, so I'm sorry about that. Yeah. But certainly it's an area that mindfulness is being applied to that field.
It's not really answering your question, but when people get dementia, they also have partners and family, and those people suffer enormously as well. So certainly mindfulness would be of great benefit, compassion training to help carers to look after themselves so that they could look after others. So that would definitely work.
It's used quite widely in the caring, to help people who are caring. So the study that came out last week for the Breathworks program for people with spinal cord injuries and their partners and their carers. And it showed benefit across all those people. But often it's the carers who are under enormous stress and enormous strain. Yeah. Thank you.
I was very curious about breathworks, and if I want to be an expert in mindfulness, is there some kind of curriculum that's followed, and what does that journey look like for a beginner? You mentioned some frameworks like how many years timeline. If you could tell a little bit more about what that looks like.
Well, somewhere in this room should be a copy of my book, is there? Yeah. So I published a book called Mindfulness for Health, and that is it's an 8-week program. So the very most minimal thing you could do is read the book and follow that program over 8 weeks, and there's a CD in the back with guided practices. Yeah. So that's this book here. At the moment, I don't think anyone's offering, well, I know no one's offering this particular 8-week program in Singapore, but there are other 8-week programs. So there's many different mindfulness-based applications. So they're called MBIs, which means mindfulness-based interventions. And there's mindfulness-based stress reduction, and there's courses here in that, isn't there, at SMU? Yeah. But our one, which is mindfulness-based pain management, this is the textbook, as it were. You can do it online, so if you go onto our website, there's an online version, and there's an online version with a mentor. So I could talk to you at the end if you're interested. And then we offer a teacher training pathway. And the teacher training pathway is 2 residential weeks, and at the moment you do that either in Australia or England. We haven't got that in Southeast Asia yet, but we're hoping to develop that before long. So you do 1 week, and then you go away and do practice, and you come back and do another week, and then you lead a course under supervision, and if that all goes well, you get accredited with our UK-based organisation. But generally, to become a teacher of mindfulness, it is quite a rigorous training, as it should be, because you were dealing with minds. We're dealing with you need to have skills and confidence around how do you work with the mind. And also we want, because mindfulness is quite new in our cultures, we want it to have a high standing and not to be something you just learn in a weekend and then start teaching. Do you want to say more about this in terms of Singapore?
Ask a question.
Yes.
So one of the things that are fearful about teaching mindfulness is that the mind runs amok. And have you come across certain situations where you have to kind of break glass and look for the resuscitator? What are the moments that we might come across here?
Chris,
Ah.
can I suggest that you come with me in 2 months' time? Retreat, in a retreat situation where you're taught mindfulness so that you never do what you just mentioned.
No, but I mean, different people have, take away certain things, and they have their own inner tension that might be expressed in a class, let's say.
Yes.
And certainly we have to teach teachers how to deal with those situations.
Yeah, your teachers need to be confident because we're dealing with the mind, and the mind isn't just here, it's emotions as well. And on a pain course, you're helping people who've got sometimes very severe pain learn to manage their pain by coming into relationship with their pain rather than blocking it out. Well, that's quite a deep journey for people. But certainly on our program, it's very, very gradual, and it's very carefully put together so that, for example, we don't really get people turning towards their pain until week 4. So they've had 3 weeks of cultivating awareness. But yeah, things can come up. The main exclusion criteria for a mindfulness program for us would be really active psychiatric illness. So if you're actively psychotic, very, very depressed, we maybe would suggest now's not the time. Or extreme anxiety, that's another one that I think is really hard to sit still. If you've got extreme anxiety, you might be better off going to the gym or something, than trying to sit still. So there are, within mindfulness programs, there's generally a process where people apply the teacher will talk to them and see if it's appropriate at this time. Generally on our program, like we've never had any really major problems. I think because it is very, very gentle. And we will generally take people who, we'll take most people on our program. We don't have very, very strict. There's nice music. Do you want to say more about that, Jochen, or anything? Based on your experience of the mind running amok?
Well, just kind of what you're saying, supporting that. It's gentle. A mindfulness approach is quite gentle, I think. So we're not trying to force the mind to change. So we're not using a very powerful approach, I think. And by doing so, you approach it gently, slowly, and you notice where the resistance is, and I think then you can hold back, and always with that awareness, because that's emphasized. So I think that makes a big difference.
Was your question about the mindfulness teacher or the practitioner? I thought you mentioned the teacher.
Practitioner.
I think I'll just add that certainly in our training, learning how to look after yourself seems very important. It's a big part of mindfulness. Understanding what your needs are and trying to make the right decisions so that your needs are fulfilled, and helping you to give yourself the best conditions in which you can live your life, so that hopefully that would stop that whole process from kicking in. But in people who practice mindfulness, things do come up, and things that may have been bothering you over a long period of time. And sometimes it may be necessary to seek some sort of other professional help, but usually people find that they can work with maybe sort of minor traumas that might come up from them in the past. It depends what one means by running amok. But, certainly it's a big emphasis on walking the talk. If you're going to practice mindfulness, if you're going to teach it, you really need to learn how to make the right decisions, because you're becoming more and more aware, and you have compassion for yourself, you care about yourself, you respect yourself, take responsibility for yourself.
I want to add one thing, using that question as the opportunity to emphasize, if you're thinking about doing a mindfulness course, because it's getting more popular now, right? I do think it's a good advice to choose also carefully the facilitator, the teacher, because with the growing demand, sometimes there can be people getting into it who perhaps don't have a lot of experience or not a very deep understanding of it, and they might teach it in a way that's not very skillful, or that could be potentially dangerous, even because we're dealing with the mind. So do look out that you get quality teachers.
Come to
A
SM.
couple of questions. One is related to what the gentleman asked a while ago, that's dementia.
Sorry, say that again?
Can't hear you.
So what about mild to moderate autism, ADHD, where there's a clear lack of awareness and focus? Has there been any body evidence to actually help these people? That's my first question. Second question is, what's the degree of adoption of mindfulness in Singapore at the present moment? The degree of adoption of mindfulness in Singapore.
In Singapore, okay. Yeah. There is some, people are using mindfulness with ADHD and autism and things like that,
Mild to moderate, yeah.
but that, you moderate it. So a very skillful mindfulness teacher will take the principle of awareness and calming, and they will adapt that to the population. So if you've got a kid that can't sit still, you'll come up with a game. Maybe you show the robot. It's so good at that. This is something one of our teachers came up with for really active kids. Go on.
I could all invite you to do this with me.
Yeah.
If you want to stand up, it's just something quite nice to do. So you have to pretend you're young at heart. Don't pretend you're young at heart, really. And what you need to do is stand like a robot, or a bit like a soldier. You're really stiff. You might go like this. Yeah, you're looking like a lot of robots, yeah? And then someone comes along and flicks your switch and there's no power. That's what you're trying to do with mindfulness, is to become aware that you're overdoing things in a way. You're on an autopilot. You're just going through life automatically doing this and doing that. Someone presses your button and blow up, and in mindfulness, it's really trying first of all to just calm down all that energy, all that kind of chaos that so often takes up the mind. It's like flicking that switch, and you just and taking a breath is a good way of doing it. That's why we call it Breathworks, and we found that really works for people. So you could stay standing or you could sit now. Thank you for joining me.
That's a kind of example of a little exercise you can come up with for hyperactive kids. Yeah. So there's lots of there's a thing called .B that's come out of the UK, which is Mindfulness in Schools project. Very big research project being done at the moment through Oxford University, funded by the Wellcome Trust, looking at mindfulness for kids. And they're called .B, which means stop and breathe. And the kids text back to each other. They text .B. It's brilliant. And they've got lots of fantastic games for bringing mindfulness to kids. So you probably wouldn't do a program for people with ADHD or autism that's sitting still and meditating, but you come up with something where it's applying the same skills of coming back to the breath, coming back to the body, calming down.
Just also what you said earlier in terms of the caregivers. I think there's more research on caregivers, right? Or parents, right? Of children, for example, because it tends to be easier to do research also with them, right? Because they may be more suitable to take a mindfulness course. In fact, even here in Singapore, one person who has been involved in quite a lot of research is Dr. Jeffrey Chan at the Minds, working with oftentimes with individuals with mental disabilities and their caregivers. And they have quite a lot of research showing that that mindfulness training for the caregivers, not only does it help them, but it also helps the person they're caring for. Because it's you're not independent of each other, right? Of course, when they are less stressed, when they can live life with more presence, then of course they interact differently with each other, and then it also affects the child, for example, or whoever the person is. That's quite a bit of research there.
Presumably that will be the same for parents too. You'd be a better parent.
Yes. Yeah.
Took good care of yourself.
Yeah. It's actually a format called MBCP, Mindfulness-Based for Childbirth and Parenting.
That's right.
Yeah, other programs.
So I think you had another question,
Let's
which is
take a
the prevalence in Singapore, was it?
Yeah.
The level of adoption.
I mean, the level of adoption, like just how many people are practicing?
Is it a buzzword already? And it's quite not near the UK level, but where are we in Singapore?
I see. Okay. Well, we don't have any. I don't think there are any studies in terms of the descriptive percentages. But we're very, very different from the UK, for example, and partly because there it has been officially recognized, right, as a treatment, so funded by the NHS, and we don't have that level of institutional kind of support here, right? It's definitely becoming, the awareness has been increasing a lot. But of course, practicing is much harder, right? It's a much bigger commitment. At the level of practice, I think we're seeing it much more. But still, it's I think we're just at the beginning of it. So the rate of increase is quite high. But because we started at a very low level, still so many aspects of Singapore society, different spheres that haven't been reached much yet. So at SMU, the courses that we offer, the open enrollment courses, interest really in demand increasing a lot. But still, it's only us. If you think about how many people live in Singapore and how many people would benefit from it, right? There's a long way to go.
There are many organizations or people who are practicing this here or even teaching this. I'm going to do a little bit of advertising, if you like. My daughter runs a mindfulness training program for corporates, and she's done it for schools also. So there is an awareness growing in Singapore, and more people go to her to take up the programs. And it's relatively new, but I think she's doing extremely well for a beginner in this line.
Yeah. So nowadays, I think the challenge is more, one person, how much can one person do, right? There's a lack of qualified instructors in a way, right? They are here and there, but the numbers are still relatively low as compared to the population that we have here.
There is among some friends of mine who are strong Christians. They have this notion that this whole thing has this Buddhist connection, and there is this worry about conversion and all that stuff. How do you explain that away?
It's completely secular and it's scientifically based, and depending on the audience, I probably would acknowledge the roots, because it seems a bit sort of ungrateful not to acknowledge the roots. It does come from Buddhism, but Buddhism, according to some people, is not even a religion. It's a quality of life, a way of life. It's a philosophy, and it just happens to be that the Buddhists are the experts in training the mind. They've got 2,500 years of hardcore practice, yeah, but that these mindfulness courses, it's a secular adaptation, and the way we normally reassure people is with all the science, because you could even say, certainly in the West, I don't know what it's like in Singapore, but science is the new religion. People will believe science. So if you tell them more about the brain studies and the evidence base, that's often very reassuring. And we're not trying to convert anyone to Buddhism. We're trying to help people. It's very, very simple. That's why I'm doing it. I'm trying to help people. I do happen to be a Buddhist, but my Breathworks life is taking the training that I've had over decades and applying it to everybody in the world, ideally. Yeah, so it can be a fear sometimes, but we can reassure people that it's secular and it's science-based.
I think, could I just say, I think there is a need to be sensitive to the background and origins of mindfulness. I mean, for me, I'm engaged in this practice for a long time. And my teacher has actually been teaching mindfulness for the last 60 years of his life. So I think that when you embrace the energy of mindfulness for the good of mankind, it cuts across every sphere of human activity and religions, etc.
Yeah.
Because Vidyamala has shown that by actually embracing this in her own life, she has been able to harness the energy of mindfulness for her own good. And this is obviously can be translated a million times, millions of times, for people who are suffering from pain. And I think that in the Singapore context, of course, we have to be sensitive, conscious of this fact, the origins. But there's no denial where it came from, right? The origins. But it doesn't mean that the energy of mindfulness cannot be used in a secular way for the good of mankind. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So whether it be in education, whether it be in healthcare, or whether it's in SMU for leadership, teaching.
Interestingly, a few years ago we had I think it was a seminary, a Roman Catholic group of priests actually, who were really stressed. And they employed us to actually teach them mindfulness. So at least the Roman Catholic Church doesn't have a kind of big problem with it. They didn't in this particular group in the North of England.
Other religions where there's a problem.
I don't know whether this will help since you mentioned Roman Catholic. So Father Lawrence Freeman, if you go to YouTube, you can find him trying to talk Lee Kuan Yew into meditating. The famous YouTube video when he asked whether world leaders should meditate, and he said that this is not exclusive to Buddhism. In fact, in the Christian faith, to go to the desert and to pray. In fact, it is a form of
Yeah.
contemplation and meditation. And I don't think this is, I think that there's physical pain, there's mental burden. So health is a lot more than just free of disease, but free of suffering, but really mental and spiritual health. And spirituality we don't need to be shy to say that, it is important in life. Whatever the denomination is, as long as we share the, concept of love, freedom, and respect for one another. To bandish this, this is Buddhism, therefore, it's not fit for other humankind, I think it's just wrong.
And just to add to that, I've overheard this phrase quite a number of times in my life about the fear of practicing mindfulness because it seems like it's religious. So the phrase, it goes something like this. So some religion may practice mindfulness, but practicing mindfulness doesn't make one religious. So something to contemplate upon. So any more questions from the audience? We have about 7 minutes left. Yes.
I'm interested to find out what Sengkang Health has done so far and how has it been received. Sorry?
Can't hear.
Oh, can't hear. Oh, I'm wondering what has Sengkang Health done in terms of mindfulness and how has it been received so far? And also, in your opinion, how far are we in Singapore to the day from now until to the day where mindfulness can be prescribed as one of the treatments for patients in the future? How far in the future do you
I'll
think?
address the last question first. I think it would be a continuous journey. I don't think we'll ever reach our goal, certainly not in my lifetime. They are already being prescribed, either as part of a therapy. I was just sharing earlier that some of my psychologists use mindfulness technique for specific conditions. But you're right, in Singapore, there's no general, let's say, medical council censured, prescription treatment that you can get reimbursement from medicine. But we'll reach there, I think. So just for the rest of you, Sengkang Health is, it's an offshoot of Sing Health SGH. We are hopefully opening later part this year in the northeast. It's a large general hospital. We think that eventually we will have about 5,000 staff. So we've been walking this journey about 4 years because I realized there's a void, there's a vacuum that needs to be filled. Practicing medicine the same way we have always done, not going to fulfill our mission, which is healthy living, but more importantly, fulfilling lives. People need to get out from their denial and come to terms. The acceptance of aging and even end of life is very important concept, and so we need to have our own staff embrace this first and foremost before they can go out and treat our community. So we do orientation, onboarding. The CEO actually will go to every orientation and talk about mindfulness as an introduction. We give them cards of the key concepts of patience, compassion, letting go, and acceptance. And they talk about among themselves and share stories and their own concept. And I would make some comments and tell my own stories. And we have weekly lunchtime sessions with open to all staff who can come in and do guided meditation. And every Friday, today is Thursday, but tomorrow is public holiday, so Patrick will organize, and there's a CEO mindfulness session. They will come and again share stories. I think instead of giving instructions, sharing stories, people take away whatever is useful for themselves to apply to their own lives. I'm hearing that people are finding that our staff are a little bit more patient and a little bit kinder, and we usually have very good patient satisfaction survey results among the top, and certainly we hope that that will continue when we finally open in Sengkang.
I can just add on one thing you had mentioned earlier is that you even find that when it comes to recruiting, some applicants mentioned that they will join you because of this.
Yeah.
So this is something quite amazing.
We want to join an organization where I don't have to watch my back all the time. So I don't know. I'll shy away from making comments whether we are there. It's still a very early part of the journey.
But at least we know which hospital here kind of have a mindfulness initiative right now.
I'd just like to say I've only met Chris today at lunchtime, but I find it very inspiring. You know, the head of a hospital is wanting to bring this in so that the people who work in the hospital are happier and healthier, and then the patients are experiencing more kindness and compassion. I mean, that's remarkable, really. And as you say, it's bit by bit by bit, baby steps. But that's, as I said, that's how you turn around the ocean liner. And eventually, hopefully, in our healthcare systems, it will just become quite normal that we are attending to our minds and our hearts. Rather than it just being
I'm very grateful that we have friends like these. Carmen trained our staff. Johan also is now training our trainers. A bit bold. We don't know whether we will make it. But
I think there's a lot of good things happening in that. I think your aspirations are high, which is good. A good leader also has high aspirations, but there's a lot of good things already happening also that make a real difference. It's exciting, and I think that can set a great example for other organizations as well. I mean, if you are thinking about your organization, can you start something there, right?
Yeah.
Can you start a community there? And from there you can make a real difference to yourself and to others.
I ask one question on the SMU side. You're running these programs, are they open to the public or only for the students?
They're open to the public as well. So it depends, the different programs. But we have programs open to the public.
Can you refer to the website business.smu.edu.sg/mindfulness? You can see all the programs.
thank you.
Could you share more in depth about your mindfulness journey, how it helped you to overcome pain? Like I'm very sure when you first started mindfulness, the pain would still be there, but eventually how did you, allow your mind to overcome the pain? Would you like to share more in depth?
Okay.
This will be the last question for today.
Well, one of the models that we use is that of primary and secondary suffering. So maybe that will be a way of unpacking this. So initially, if you said to me, asked me about my pain, I would have just said something like, oh, my back is killing me. Yeah, I would have just had some phrase like that. And it would have just been a general sense of, I hurt. Yeah, and it's horrible. With mindfulness, what I've learned to do is to use awareness to investigate that direct experience. So rather than my back is killing me, it's like, okay, well, what is actually happening? What are the unpleasant sensations? And right now, the unpleasant sensations are sort of aching in my lower back. I've got some nerve pains in my legs, tingling. Yeah, so that's the actual unpleasant sensation. And then, if one isn't aware, if you haven't learnt to manage properly, what we automatically do is we resist that. Yeah, so you have the unpleasant sensations and you have resistance. I don't want this mind, and then you get what we call secondary suffering, and secondary suffering is mentally, it's things like catastrophic thinking. So it's mental states like, oh my God, I can't bear it, it's going to kill me, my life is ruined. Very understandable. I'm not in any way judging these states. We all do it. But I don't need to do that. With mindfulness, I can recognize, oh, that's a mental event I can let go of. And you learn how to do that through practice. Emotionally, it's anxiety, fear, depression, all those kind of things. And physically, secondary suffering is secondary tension. So if you've got the unpleasant sensations, you're resisting against them, you're tensing against them, it's the fist, you're holding your breath. And what I do with back pain, I think many people do with back pain because it's low in the body, you sort of pull up away from it. So then your shoulders get tense, you get a headache maybe, you're holding your breath, and you try to live a life like this. and you're really, really going to hurt because there's so much tension there. Yeah. With mindfulness, what I've learned to do is to let go or to soften the resistance and the secondary suffering. So I'm just left with the unpleasant sensations. Yeah, I can't necessarily do anything about those, but that's a whole load less overall suffering because it's just unpleasant sensations in my back rather than the whole catastrophe. So the training is to learn how to recognise this distinction between primary and secondary, to let go of the secondary, and the way we do that is by softening the resistance. And the way we do that is with the breath. Just allowing the breathing to be in the whole body. Because if I'm sitting here now, you can see I'm hoping that you can see I'm relatively relaxed in my chair. I'm sort of resting in my chair. That's very different from being like this, isn't it? I mean, I lived like this for years, I'm ashamed to say. But that's a hard life. But I can live this life. Does that answer your question? It's a kind of model of primary and secondary, and the way you do it is you do the practices. And probably the main practice that I found has turned around this habit of resistance is body scanning. So one of the meditations we do is a body scan meditation where you lie down and you guide your awareness through all the different parts of the body. So you're learning to inhabit your body rather than being split off from your body. And I've done body scans every day for 30 years. And it becomes a habit to rest in my body rather than fight my body. So what we're doing with mindfulness training, the practice, as I mentioned earlier on, we're profoundly changing our default setting. As we have default settings of our habitual way of being, we can profoundly change the default setting so it becomes normal to be soft and open rather than normal to be tight and rattled.
And how long did that journey take you?
That's a good question. Yeah, because as Chris was saying, the journey never ends. And probably tiny micro change happened straight away. And then after a year, there was more change. And after another year, there was more change. I just happen to have been doing it for 35 years. So I've got this amount of change. But if you had said to me 6 months down the line, I could have said, yeah, there's been a tiny bit of change. So it isn't as if you're really, really tight and contracted and then suddenly one day you're relaxed and open. It doesn't work like that. There's a very nice image, actually, symbol for this, is you're going for a walk on a misty day. I don't know if you have these days in Singapore. A sort of wetness. Yeah. You go for a walk and when you get home, you're completely wet because you've been in the mist and you're completely drenched. But you don't know when you got wet. There wasn't a certain point on the walk where someone poured a bucket of water over you, but something, your experience has completely changed. You've gone from being a dry person to being a wet person because you've just been immersing yourself in this mist, this misty day. I think it's just very similar. You become a more calm, relaxed person because you've been immersing yourself in the practice. But you don't really know at what point change happens. It just happens little bit by little bit. And you just have confidence in that.
So, thank you for all the questions. Maybe I thought to just end off from the journey never ends. What about how the start of the journey? So my own question I prepared in case there are enough questions is thinking about mindfulness whether as a form of intervention, as is commonly known, MBR is mindfulness-based intervention. But what about mindfulness as a form of prevention? Have you ever thought about that? Do we only go to mindfulness because we are feeling that chronic pain, emotional pain, and then we turn to mindfulness? But how about taking care of our own well-being? Need a question to take away from the start of the journey, not just the end as well. So if you haven't started thinking about when to start, maybe this is the time to think about it right now.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you everyone for your presence, and thank you to the panelists for having their precious time being here to share with us their journey about mindfulness. So thank you everyone.